There we go.
So Renee, I met you on a day a lot like today.
Yes, in this building.
In this building, and I walked in because I'd met somebody years ago who was really helping people with hyperbaric oxygen, and he had a huge effect on my life in his philosophy of things. And I just said, oh my goodness, there's somebody here doing that. And I walked in, and I felt like I'd known you for all my life. I could feel how you worked with your clients, what you did for them, and I just felt this is a person I've known all my life. It was.
And you walked in saying, Dr. Renee, which is what everyone calls me. By the way, hi, I'm Dr. Renee Detky. I run Achieve It Naturally Hyperbarics, and this is Dan Putnam, a pain specialist. Welcome to our very first podcast.
Thanks for joining us. So anyway, how did you get involved? You know, what I feel, because I'm a person that feels a lot. So when I met you and I felt your being, there was something that I could feel that went a long way back. And tell me about how you first got interested in the field of natural health.
So I have an aunt that's a naturopath. Thank you very much to her. And at 18, I thought, that sounds like a good path. And then sometime in my 20s, I was at a dinner with a group of friends and said, I want to get a doctorate in preventative medicine, was what I called it. They may not remember that, but I do. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I've put it out there, now I have to do it. Mm. Well, I didn't actually finish school until I was in my 40s, because beginning at 20 years old, and my last child was born around 36, I was busy being a single parent for a while and a mother of 4 for a while, and just life was busy. And as they got into school, then I started getting more and more education and helping more and more people, and here I am 20-some years later.
You know, for a lot of moms, the simple thing like a child's earache or something like that, all of a sudden sends them on what I call the Earth Mother route. You know, if I go into the health food store, I see all these moms and they want to do something natural for their kids. Did being a mom have an effect on you and how you started to look at things? Of course.
And with my first child, I was very naive. I was very young. Mm-hmm. You know, I didn't realize some of the dangers. And, 40 years ago, they weren't quite as dangerous as the vaccines now. Mm. And with my 4th child, my health was not good, mine personally. And so her health was not as good because the microbiome that I passed down both during pregnancy, through the birth canal, and breastfeeding wasn't as healthy as it could have been. And
did you know that then?
No. So
tell me about the microbiome and what you have liked to have passed on but wasn't able to.
So when you are pregnant, everything in your microbiome affects your child. Mm-hmm. It affects you, it affects the way you think, it affects your health, it affects your immune system. And so definitely it affects someone else growing inside of you, completely dependent on your body. And then a baby that is born through the vaginal canal starts with a better microbiome all over their face and skin and down their throat than someone that's born via C-section. And now there's even a few places, hospitals, particularly around universities, where they will swab the mother's vaginal canal for cesarean section children and smear it all over them just for that same effect. But then also breastfeeding, all the healthy antibodies and immune fighting things you have will go on and help the immune system of that baby. So the reason a mother and child are together that whole first year or two when they're breastfeeding is because anything the baby's exposed to, the mother needs to be exposed to. So her body can figure out how to fight it off and teach the baby's immune system through the breast milk.
Wow. And how much do you think the immune system plays as we get into our 60s, 70s, 80s, what do you see, because you're a doctor of natural health, what do you see in your practice with patients?
Well, most of us at some point in our life have abused our bodies. And even people that haven't, by the time we reach our 50s, most of us, even our 40s, some of us, are starting to realize our weaknesses. You know, whether it's a genetic weakness or it's something that your lifestyle that you've done day to day or not done day to day is beginning to show a symptom. You know, and just because you're symptom free doesn't mean you're healthy. It just means you don't have any symptoms yet. So, and as you age, you know, it's a whole different system. You're dealing with things that are beginning to wear out or are worn out. You know, in this day and age, we have access to stem cells and increasing our own stem cell production and, you know, reproducing more stem cells than we used to. So our ability to anti-age is so much better even than it was 20 years ago. I mean, we have biohackers that, what do? They're just hacking the body. So, and that's all they do. So, yeah, lots of things can be done, lots of changes. The biggest thing I think I see in people over 50 is worn out mitochondria. And mitochondria do two things. Every cell has mitochondria minus some in the brain. And they detoxify and they also help with energy production. Well, if your body is toxic, which the older we get, the more toxic we become, then you don't have as much energy. So no matter what your age is, you should have good energy. And if you don't, then we need to figure out why. Do we need to detox you?
Is there a test for the mitochondria to see if...
Really your energy level. Yeah.
Oh, your personal energy level.
Yes, your personal energy level. And just because you're 60 instead of 6, you should still have great energy.
So, like one of the symptoms they say for depression is low energy level. So a person says, well, you know, I've had low energy level for years or whatever.
Right.
They could still do something with their mitochondria that might change that? Is that what you're kind of saying?
That is one of those things, definitely. And then, you know, if you come to me and you're young, I want to look, do you have anemias? Are you low on iron? Are you low on B12? Is your thyroid okay? Thyroid affects the whole body. And a little glitch in the thyroid can make a huge difference. Do we need to detoxify? Most of us do. We live in a toxic world. You know, even if you aren't eating toxic food, just the air that you breathe. Walking into a public restroom that has air fresheners.
Really?
Yes, those things are very toxic. They're bad for the neurological systems. They're carcinogens. Carpet, new carpets, new mattresses, they're always gassing off. Well, that's a toxin.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I remember one time when I was a kid and we got new carpet, and man, I had a headache.
You probably rolled all over it as a kid.
And I had a headache for a long time, yeah. And
Yeah.
there was actually right down the street from where we're at right now, there used to be a fabric shop. And you know, air conditioning was kind of new. They had air conditioning. But I remember I'd go in and immediately within 3 or 4 seconds, I'd start with a headache. You know, I was 5 years old.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
It had to be the dyes and stuff like that.
The formaldehydes, the colors, Yep. I feel that way when I go shopping at Christmas time and the stores are filled with all this new stuff and new clothing, but it's also so many more chemicals that's, you know, stuff that's just been sitting there for months and months. It's now all new stuff. So, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's pretty strange. Now, your aunt, was she, where was she? She was in...
At first she was in Scottsdale, Arizona, and then she was in Austin, Texas.
So
and she is still around.
You spent time with her in Scottsdale. What was the environment like? Because that's different from our environment here in the South. What was that? You were like 18, 19?
No, I didn't go out there till I was 21. I should have gone when I was 18, but I didn't. And I went when I was 21. And healing. I mean, her home, her environment, and most of her life she's worked from her home. But Scottsdale is beautiful. She lived there because it was the best climate in the whole country. You know, it's basically dry. It's cool in the winters, but not cold. And it gets warm in the summertime, but not quite like here.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the humidity.
The humidity, yeah.
That just takes us down, yeah, and makes our hair frizz. So.
I remember when I was a kid that physicians would often say to people, well, you may need to move to a drier climate when they had allergies. And the funny thing is now there is this other thought that say, well, maybe your problem is you're too dried out because of air conditioning and things like that, and maybe you need more humidity.
Yeah, well, especially when you think of in the winter. It's dry outside, and then we run heat on the inside, so we're dry. And Floridians, we're used to plenty of humidity.
So eventually, what I saw, the sign outside, hyperbaric oxygen, achieve it naturally. I'd had a profound experience, and I'll share that with you. When I first became a therapist, I decided I would go learn from anybody that was solving problems. And so there was a physician that had a great reputation, and he was kind of like an Edison type personality. It just, he would just look at somebody and go down this direction and then say this and that, and he was just very unusual, but he was getting great results.
Yeah, but he could think outside the box, still does.
Yeah, it was an outside the box thinker. So what happened was one day he would take me in with his clients, and I spent a lot of Monday afternoons with him for a few months, and he would say, okay, now what would you do? And I said, well, I'm not a doctor, you're the doctor. And he said, no, but I still want to know what you saw and what you felt.
Yeah.
And so we did this, and then we'd go back in, and he'd offer this means of working with them and on this problem. Sometimes prescriptions, sometimes procedures, but then we'd come out and say, now why did I do that? And so it's really funny. I got to see inside his brain why he was doing what he was doing. And so one day I said, hey, you've got all these hyperbaric chambers, and he had a huge one that you would walk in, had 6 people in it. And I said, tell me about that. And he said, it's better for you to go over and sit in the waiting room and just talk to people. So I did, and there's people that were coming from Atlanta and people that were coming from Miami and Tampa. And, this was probably 1995 or 6, something like that. Yeah. And there was somebody that he woke up out of a coma. They brought the person over on a stretcher.
And rolled him in.
I was just hearing from the people themselves, and I went back to him, I said, wow, and he says, yeah, I can't say anything to top what they've told you. He says,
Yeah, exactly.
He says, it doesn't always happen, but it happens a lot. And so so when I come by and I saw your sign, I said, oh, I got to see this person. And so tell me how you first got interested in hyperbaric oxygen and the power of working with it.
Well, I went to Amen Clinic. I was, in my late to mid 50s, concerned about my memory. And I have a group of children that are highly intelligent, as well as my husband, who thinks on his feet, never had a brain injury. And he's, a very fast talker and fast thinker. And I went to Amen Clinic concerned about my memory. And they did a full scan on my brain and watched it through a SPECT scan, nuclear dye running through me, and looked at the functions. And they said, well, your memory centers of your brain work fine, but your ADD is so bad that you can't focus well enough to remember things. I went, oh yeah, I've lived with that my whole life. And you learn to compensate. And so from there, they tried me on a bunch of different herbs, most of which I tried before, didn't seem to have a big effect. Then they wanted to try me on some drugs, Adderall in particular, and I just wasn't willing to go there because I've seen long-term what that can do to the brain. And then they said, well, your next step is hyperbarics. And I had a friend that had one, and went and tried it several times. Well, then when I tried hyperbaric pressure with oxygen 4 days in a row out at a training class in Arizona with Dr. Borson, who we will have on the podcast eventually, I went, wow, this is why people love hyperbarics. That was the magic point.
Okay, but what did you feel? What did it feel like to you?
My very first section, without added oxygen, it lifted the brain fog. But that only lasted for a few days. You know, and they say really to get the long-term benefit that you don't lose is 40 sessions. So it takes lots
40.
of 40. Yes,
Wow.
yeah, it takes lots and lots of sessions. And that's one of those things that, you know, I loved having them 4 days in a row, 4 dives in 4 days. That was definitely what I recommend to new clients, that they try that.
How long does it take?
Oh, a session, we try to keep you under pressure about an hour. And then depending on how your ears do, some people can go to pressure in 5 minutes, depending on the pressure that we're going to. Some people, we give them 15 to 20 minutes because I don't want your ears to burst and I don't want your ears to hurt. And that eardrum's got to learn to have that flexibility. It's kind of like using a muscle that you haven't used. You know, people that have scuba dived, their ears have learned how to do it. People that go up in airplanes and travel and they learn to clear that pressure, they don't have any trouble. But people that haven't, you know, done a change in pressure, the eardrums are going, what are you doing? And we just have to go slowly. So I block off an hour and a half on the schedule for somebody to get into a hyperbaric.
Now, what sort of, now this guy, the people that I sat with in the waiting room, there was all kinds of things, you know, people recovering from strokes and things like that.
Yes.
Now, what have you seen here with patients that you're working with today?
I've treated a couple people with strokes. One of them graduated and got back to her normal life as good as she was before. Another one, we didn't see as much progress. You know, it was hard for her to do as many dives as she did and only see. And understanding the brain a little better, if your stroke is on the right side of your brain, it's different than if the stroke is on the left side. On the right side, the left side of your brain has a map for everything. So if the damage is on the right, the left side can take over and remap that right side. If your stroke is on the left side of the brain and it's affected that map, then it's harder to bring everything back in the brain because the map is lost, is the best way to describe it, the way it was explained to me by a neurologist. So, like the stories that you heard in that waiting room, all of my mentors have stories of people in their chamber, children, speaking their first words.
Wow.
10-year-olds that hadn't spoken, 5-year-olds that hadn't spoken.
Now, what would the doctor say that the injury was that caused those children not to be verbal?
Well, and it's different in each child, but the reason I got these chambers was to treat brains. And when you put a brain under pressure, or the whole body under pressure, and give it extra oxygen, well, you absorb more oxygen. Your brain is only about 2% of the body weight, but it uses 20% of your oxygen. So we can't increase the amount that your red blood cells carry, because you can measure that on a pulse ox. What we're increasing is the oxygen that's pushed into the serum. So there's this extra oxygen flowing around your body, and the body utilizes it wherever it needs it. Whether it's to fight off bad bacteria, because the healthier bacteria tend to be aerobic, and the ones that are causing us issues and causing infections, those tend to be anaerobic. And so, yeah, we help infections when we douse your body with oxygen. But tell us a little bit more about you.
Well,
How'd you get started as a massage therapist?
Well, what happened with me is that my parents had me later in life.
Okay.
And I was really, I was taking them to doctor's appointments as they got older. And it surprised me that there was this gap between what our physicians could do and then quality of life issues. And it's not that our physicians and men and women that are trained by our society to take care of us medically are lacking anything. It's just that what the system is sort of designed to do is to fix you when you're broken. and try to find ways not to let you break. But I remember the doctor said to my dad, he was asking about a knee problem that he had, and the doctor said, well, what do you expect? You're getting older. And I was at the time working for a company that was connected with Federal Express over in the United Kingdom, and I just said, man, you know, we'll rent a helicopter or a plane or something if a part for an oil field pumping agent needs to be sent up to the North Sea from where we were at, we would go to extraordinary lengths to get something next day delivered. And this guy, I can't imagine if he would ask the same question of his doctor when he got older, if it would be an acceptable answer for him. So that set me on the path to researching and try to understand what else out there was available. So I had an opportunity. I was involved in the martial arts, and I was very fascinated with this idea that there's certain pressure points that can knock people out or do things like that. And it was based upon the ancient Chinese and Japanese. And as I studied it more, I thought I'd like to see how this can be helpful in medicine. So I became a massage therapist, and my main interest, even though I do relaxation massages for people occasionally, my main interest was, well, what can I do for changing somebody's pain? Somebody's been in pain for a long time. What can I do, and what's possible? So that kind of got me on the road, and that's kind of become my passion, if you will.
This reminds me of the day I met you.
Yeah.
And you walked into my office and we talked, and I asked you what you did, and you said you were a therapist. I don't know if it was a psych therapist, a massage therapist, a physical therapist. And you looked at me and you said, does your shoulder hurt? And I was like, yeah, because that's where all my stress, my tension goes, is into my shoulder. And my left shoulder and neck were bothering me. And you grabbed my right hand and hit the right pressure point, and my shoulder went, ah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was definitely intriguing. And I liked your story about, you know, being in martial arts, being in massage therapy, but pulling the two together, which to me is very much like acupuncture points.
Well, yeah, they're the points. I don't use needles. In fact, I don't like needles used on me, although I've got some great acupuncturists that I go to when there's something going on with me. Yeah, you know, it's very interesting. That particular system that I use, I call it the 5-second system. And I learned this from a friend of mine who is an acupuncturist, and we shared an office together since 1996. And he had met this master as a teaching master, and he's now passed away, as my friend Trav has passed away. And what he was able to do in his office in Southern California, he, within 5 seconds, would put a needle in, and 95% of the people would feel 50% or 100% pain gone, right? So this is a system that I use. I don't use it all the time, but you know that you had a patient that was a stroke patient, and I happened to meet her, and there was a point on the opposite ankle, and so when I pressed that point, her shoulder had been stuck, and it was able to go up and probably about 30% more, but it happens within 5 seconds. You know, it's if I've chosen the right meridian, I've chosen the right point, then
you know
it happens within
5 seconds.
Within 5 seconds. You know, I've got another guy came to the office a couple weeks ago, and he'd had back problems. He was a young guy, maybe 25, 28 years old, and his girlfriend worked at one of the major hospital groups around, and he'd been in for MRIs and X-rays and couldn't figure out why he had this numbness down his leg and this pain. And so there happened to be a point on the inside of his left elbow that affected the outside of his right leg. And so when I pressed on it, he looked at me, really surprised, and he says, "Oh, it's gone." And so I had him press on it, and then he walked around the office for a minute, and it was gone. Now, I did other therapy on him after that, but sometimes, every once in a while, there's one time it works all the way, and you never know. The master from Southern California says, well, generally, people need to come back once or twice a week for several weeks, but he says, make sure you don't put in somebody's mind that they need to do that. Maybe one time fixes it. And in this guy's situation, one time did fix. I followed him for the last little bit.
Yeah.
So you just never know. The other system I've used is something from it's very observable. It's from a physician by the name of Janet Travell, and Dr. Travell did research on every muscle in the body. So she injected well people, these were college kids, and she would inject a muscle, and then she would take a large group of them, and then they would draw out where the pain was individually, so that they couldn't look on anybody else's paper, and this is what. So there was a very objective way of knowing where somebody's pain is based upon Travell's pain pattern charts.
Oh, amazing.
And the pain pattern chart works kind of as a graph. So in other words, there is a dot of red where some of the people felt it, and where all of the people felt it, it's solid red. Now here's the thing, 80% of the time, the pain is not where the problem is, 80% of the time. And you'll find that in your field too, that seems to be, so 80% of the time the pain's not where the problem is. So a lot of times the person may have gone and gotten injected at the pain site, but they may not have solved the problem. So especially when I first started out, I was seeing a lot of work comp patients. There was literally when I first started out, a martial arts buddy of mine had a shoulder problem, and the first day my office over in San Marco was open, and he came in and he said, "Man, did what I needed to do, but you never know what's going to happen."
Right.
And he says, "Man, you fixed my shoulder," and I said, "Well, that's great, and I was just new at all this." He says, "My wife has a problem with her hip, and she's been to physical therapy, and they haven't been able to help her." I said, "Well, send her on." So she came in, and it just so happened, again, the points that I needed to work, it fixed her, right? And I'm not saying it happens all the time like that.
Right.
But her main complaint was that at the particular hospital, she had to walk up and down the ramps for the parking garage, and when she would carry work that she was going home with, it would really bother her legs. So those few points and some massage and that changed it. So she said, "Well, there is a person that is in charge of our employee health, and her mom is having a problem feeding herself because something is frozen in her arm." I said, "Well, what did the PTs say?" Because I'm new at this, I'd owned businesses before, I'd run businesses before, but I'm very new at this sort of thing, and so I always used to say, well, go to the people, figure out what the people have been working on, and maybe you can improve on it. So the PTs, she says, well, they can't seem to do anything. So this lady brought her mom in, and it was right here, and it took about an hour session, and I could get her fingers to her lips. I was doing something called myofascial release.
Right.
And so she could get her, and that made it so that she could feed herself and she could care for herself. So, those first three people that came to my office.
Yeah.
So I got a call from her a few days later, and she said, "Dan, our hospital group, we have a number of people when they go through physical therapy that, there's some doctors or support staff, they're nurses, and we don't know what to do with them. So could you see them? And so for many years, that particular hospital sent me workers' comp folks that the patient just wasn't fitting it wasn't working at PT. It's not that my brothers and sisters in PT aren't doing a great job on things. It's just that there are certain patients that kind of fit a certain mold, and if they go out of that mold, then the system's not sure what to do with them. And so that's the type of people that I've always been interested in, is how can you help these people that want to get better, that want to feel better, but somehow there's a missing connection between them and the system. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, definitely.
And so that's what I've done most of my life, and I can tell with, one of the things with workers' comp patients from that business and other businesses, you would have a person that really wanted to get better because they love what they're doing, and they would be really upset because a lot of times their boss wouldn't understand pain. And so sometimes their boss would start putting all kinds of pressure because in their mind they thought the person was faking it. In workers' comp world, maybe there's a few of that happens. But because I could understand the pain patterns that Dr. Travella defined, I could tell immediately whether the person was maybe embellishing or anything about their pain. And then the big thing about that is people also, when they've been to several doctors and they've been through different types of medicine, they feel like their body's never going to get better. And they do something that they kind of wall off because it's a disappointment that this doctor and that doctor and the other one, it's the Humpty Dumpty thing. All the king's men and all the king's horses couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again, And so that's what happens is they have this, it's a sadness,
It's almost a physical depression.
It is.
Because, their mind doesn't understand their body and their body's failing them, and then eventually, it becomes a chronic pain cycle.
Yeah, so part of
those can be broken, and it's nice, because...
And here's the thing is when, sometimes as you break the pain cycle, the person doesn't want to get excited, right? Because if they've had this pain for a year or 2 years... It's
almost disbelief.
That's almost disbelief, and there is something in medicine where they call it phantom leg syndrome. So you'll have somebody who has had a leg amputated or a limb amputated, and it will still itch. The end of that, where it should be, still itches. So there is a thing that happens where our brain still thinks, well, that should still be a problem here. And our brain's trying to tell us that. And so it's to get the person, it's a mind, body, and spirit thing, which is something you do, is you work, you're working.
That's why it's so cool to heal brains, because when you heal a brain, you heal so many other things.
You heal everything when you heal the brain,
Well, not everything. You can't grow a leg back.
Well, we just don't know.
More research to come.
More research to come. So, actually, that's very interesting because there's some research done on salamanders
that do grow limbs back.
And the interesting thing is that there was a hospital in London that found out by accident. This was before they did microsurgery to repair the joints. But when a young child had the tip of the finger cut off by an accident, and they bandaged it up, and somehow they discovered a few weeks later that it started to come back, to grow. And so for that hospital, they started doing this as the protocol at that hospital. Because they found that children under the age of 12 could regrow the end of the digit back
many more
perfectly.
Stem cells and growth factors and
And I always find that anomalies, when you study an anomaly, the difference, that's where society moves forward on things, because we see this anomaly is different from what we see all the time. And then if we study that and try to figure out why that's happening, then that gives us insight into other things.
Yeah, and that's one of our goals
Yes.
with our podcast, is to bring new things to the forefront to help people solve problems. We eventually will put out an email address for people to send in issues, and we will do our best to address them and help people find answers.
Yeah, you see, I'm sort of semi-retired now. I will only see a couple people a day, maybe 3, of cases that interest me. And what I have noticed is that through the years, a lot of physicians that I used to refer to, if they're really good, they're very busy, and people need physicians near them they can go to. Some people, if they're in a different city, they need somebody in that city. They also need a person that understands them. So you might have a personality type where a physician is maybe perfect for me, but there can be a personality type that physician is just not going to gel with this person, and there's another personality type that's perfect for them, and so that's part of the important thing to me as far as getting people connected, so that they can communicate to somebody who thinks the way they think but still has all the skills and resources. So I'm very interested in meeting with different people who have different ways of working, physicians that have different ways of working. And this is a vehicle for me to do that, so I can have a patient that I need to refer to a certain type of physician. I can know him or her and understand their thought process. Yeah, that's...
And we're going to call our podcast Better Than Air.
Believe it or
Hopefully we
not.
have, yeah, well, I think of hyperbaric, like air under pressure with a little bit of oxygen, is better than air. And that was a solution to a lot of problems. But we'd like to connect lots of people with issues to lots of other people that have solutions.
And I think thoughts are in the air. That ideas and thoughts just kind of float around and they're in the air, and it's up to us to open ourselves up and to let it in. Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks for watching.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
Good job, friends.
We can chat, can't we?
Yeah.
Believe it or not, it's better than air.
Had a couple things happen.
What's that?
Said I had a couple things.
Yeah, I kicked the wire.